Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be creating our base room template. Now, in our game, when we create our map, it is going to be constructed of a bunch of rooms, these square rooms which are going to be connected together via tunnels and doors. So in this lesson, we're going to create the room template. Essentially, this is just going to be an empty room, and then from there we can create inherited scenes for rooms of enemies, rooms of items, rooms of bosses, etc. So the basic room is going to look like this. It's going to be a square, and each of the four sides is going to feature one of two possibilities, a door or a barrier. A barrier is essentially just going to be a flat wall, whereas a door is going to be an opening that the player can go through. But each opening is also going to have a door. The reason why is because when a player enters a room, if there are enemies in the room, we don't want the player just escaping. So if the player enters a room with enemies, the doors are going to be shut, and they are only going to open again once all enemies are defeated. Okay, so we're going to have the ability to close and open doors, have barriers and tunnels and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead now and create this room template. Alright, so to begin, what we're going to do is we are going to create a brand new static body 2D, and I'm going to rename this to be room_template. Okay, this is going to be the base room, which everything that we might want to add to it is going to be expanded from. Now, with this room, again, we're going to have doors, barriers, walls, colliders, so there's going to be quite a few nodes with this. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new tile map layer, and this is essentially going to be the base layer, okay, for our tile map. So you can think of the four corners, okay, are essentially what we're going to be adding here. So what we're going to do is select this base, then over in the inspector, we have the tile set. I am going to go ahead and create a new tile set here. If we select the tile set, we can change the tile size to be 8 by 8, as that is how big my pixel, or that is how big my my sprites are. Then down here inside of the bottom, we're going to go to tile set, go down to where we have our tiles.png, and drag that in. Okay, we'll go yes. And now, as you can see, if we zoom in, we have our tiles laid out here. Now they're a bit wrong, so first of all what we need to do is add in a margin of 1 pixel and also a separation of 2 pixels. Now our tiles are going to be nicely separated here. Okay, so the next step is going to be then drawing in our corners. Remember, we don't want to draw in all the walls, as we are going to basically have different nodes that can be toggled on or off for the doors and barriers. So what I'm going to do is go to tile map. I am then going to find a nice little tile to use, maybe this one here, and then begin drawing in our level. And there we go. So as you can see, I've basically got the corners of my room here set up with the walls. Now the next step is going to be adding in wall colliders, okay, because at the moment these aren't going to have any collisions. So to add a collider, we're simply going to right click, add child node, and we are not going to add in a collision shape 2D, but rather a collision polygon 2D. Now, the reason why is because a collision polygon allows us to basically define whatever custom shape we want. So to do this, what we're going to do is essentially with the collision polygon selected, we can then click, and as you can see, it's going to create a point. We can then drag over here to create another point, and then keep on doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag it up all the way up to the top of the screen. We can then go over here, down here, over there, and then back up there. And there we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and rename this to be Wall Collider. Okay. And we want to have this along all 4 walls. So a simple way of doing this is by going to the Rotate tool, duplicating it, and then rotating it over like so. Hold down Control so it snaps. Do that again. And one more time. And there we go. We now have our 4 wall corners implemented. So if I press play, you'll see that our player can go up and collide with those walls and not go through them. But we have these holes at the top, left, bottom, and right. And these are going to be either a door or a barrier. We're going to create a much more generic term for each of those. We're going to basically call them an entrance. So an entrance is essentially going to be a hole here. We can fill it with a door. Those doors can be open or closed. There's also going to be a trigger for the next room. There's going to be quite a bit. So let's start with just a single entrance, and that is going to be the north. So if we go ahead and create a brand new node 2D, this one is going to be called entrance underscore north. Now, inside this entrance north, we are going to have, again, like I said, a number of different things. Let's start with the door. So what I'm going to do is right-click, add child node. I'm going to create a node 2D, and I'm going to call this one door. Now, for this door, this is going to also add in 2 little extra blocks that are pointing up out, so it looks like there's a tunnel leading. So what I'm going to do is I'm essentially just going to create a brand new tile map layer node as a child of this, and I'm just going to call this one tunnel. Now, for our tile set, we could go ahead and recreate that, or if we select our base tile set, click on the little down arrow next to it, and go, where is it? We go save as. Let's save that to our sprites folder right here, as we'll just call this one our tile set. Okay, save that. Then on our tunnel tile map layer, let's drag in that tile set, and we then want to then draw in our tiles. So I'm simply going to select these tiles here, like we've done before, and paint them in just, we'll go vertical, so you can press Z to rotate the tile around, like so. Okay, so that's what we got here. If I press play, it does look normal. So then what we can do is go ahead and add in our doors. So for the actual door itself, as a child of the door node, we're going to create a brand new static body 2D, call this one door underscore shut. And in here, we are going to have 2 sprites. So let's add in a sprite 2D, just call this one door sprite. And this, if we go over to our tiles, we can drag that into the texture, set that as a region, and we are simply going to select the door right here. Okay, door shut, let's actually drag this up so it's lined up with our area here. And the door sprites, we essentially just want to place them side by side because this is a 2 tile gap. We have 2 doors, or if you have an extra long door sprite, you can add that as well. We can then go ahead and add in a collision shape 2D for the door shut. This is just going to be a rectangular shape, and we want to fit it to the bounds here. There we go. And then finally, what we want to do, or not finally, there's a couple more things we want to do. We also want to go ahead and add in an exit trigger. So an exit trigger, this is going to be an area 2D on the entrance north. So area 2D. This is going to be called exit trigger, and this is essentially going to be detecting for when the player hits it when they walk through the door. So here we can just attach a little collision shape 2D. We can just make this a circle. Doesn't have to be too big, okay, because the player just has to walk through it, just like so. And then we also need a player spawn, and the player spawn is going to be a node 2D. Call this one player spawn. And this is going to be where the player is going to be teleported to when they enter the room from this direction. So if the player's in a room up here and they go south, this is where the player will spawn, okay? On here. Just like that. So you can see our entrance is pretty complex, and the next lesson we're going to be creating the appropriate scripts and creating the rest of the entrances. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we're going to continue on with our room template. Now in the previous lesson, we set up our corners as well as the north entrance. Now the entrance is made up of a number of different nodes. First of all, we have the door. Now the door is essentially a node that contains a tunnel, which is this sort of little bit that pokes out the top, as well as the door shut, which is the shut visual for our door, which adds a collider, okay? And the door, if there is no room above here, for example, the door will be disabled, and instead we need another thing to be enabled, which is going to be a barrier, okay? So the barrier is if we go ahead and create a brand new static body 2D, let's rename this to be barrier, we'll then drag it up here. Essentially the barrier is going to be those 2 little blocks. So here we can actually just go ahead and create a brand new tile map. Drag in our tile set, and the barrier is essentially just going to be these 2 blocks here. Okay, we can then move this up a little bit so it's in line. There we go. And the barrier, of course, needs a collider. So here we'll go collision shape 2D, and we'll make this a rectangle and make it fit the bounds like so. And there we go. So if there is no room above, the barrier is going to be enabled like so. Oh, I'm getting a warning here because I accidentally created a tile map rather than a tile map layer. So let's right click on that, change type, tile map layer. And there we go. Just need to go in and redo that like so. Okay, there we go. So yeah, that is our entrance north. Now each entrance is going to have its own script to manage all of its individual components. So down inside of the file system, actually no, let's select our entrance north, add a new script to it. We'll go over to our scripts folder, and I'm simply going to call this one room entrance, okay, like so. Now we're not going to be editing this script just yet, but we are just going to have it created, ready to go. Now the next step is to create essentially the other sides of our room. So to do this, I'm simply going to select our entrance north, duplicate that with Control D, and then what I'm going to do is, to make this simple, I am just going to then press E, and let's actually rename this to be entrance underscore east. I'm going to press E, hold down Control, and essentially rotate it around this way. Now it all looks good, except for the door. So if I enable the door and disable the barrier, you'll see our door's kind of a weird angle here. So let's go ahead and then rotate the door sprites so they are facing the right way. There we go. And let's do the exact same thing. Let's select the entrance north, duplicate it. I'm going to call this one entrance west, and then I'm going to rotate it this way. And then we can go in. Let's enable the door, disable the barrier, and then on the door sprites, we of course then want to rotate these to be the correct orientation. And yeah, there we go. And then finally, we want to duplicate door entrance north again for entrance south. And then we of course want to rotate this one around here. Enable the door just so we can see what we're looking at. Where is that? Right here. Disable the barrier. And we want to essentially rotate these sprites around 180 degrees. And there we go. So now if I press play, you'll see we have our room here. The north just has the barrier at the moment, whereas the sides here have the doors like so. Now, let's just go ahead and enable the door on the north one as well, just to make it consistent, disable the barrier. And yeah, so that right there is going to be our room template. You may notice as well that we are getting some debugger errors, and this is just to do with our tile set, the way it is set up. So if we open up tile set, we can then click on these three little arrows and go remove tiles in fully transparent regions, and hopefully that'll fix any issues there. So next, let's go ahead and save this room template as a scene. So I'm going to go to my scenes folder, rooms, and drag in the room template there. We'll save that. And also one more thing I forgot is let's go into our room template scene, select the root node, and attach it a new script, which is going to be inside of our scripts folder, and we're simply going to call this one room, okay, like so. Now inside of the room script, let's go ahead and give it a class name. So class name is going to be room. This is just going to be so that we can define this room script as a specific data type when we start generating the room. Same thing for room entrance. Let's give that a class name of room entrance. And there we go. So that is everything set up there. Now, in the next lesson, we can begin working on the procedural generation for our rooms. And so to do that, let's then delete the room template here, and we are ready to go. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Hey everyone, in this lesson we are going to begin setting up our room generation. This is going to probably be the biggest system in our game, and this is essentially going to allow us to procedurally generate levels, placing rooms, connecting them together, and having a game that you can play over and over again. So, how is this going to work? Well, essentially the objective for the generation is going to be first to generate a random layout of rooms, make sure they are all connected to one another, because if a room is off by itself and there's no way to get to it, then we aren't really doing our job correctly there. And finally, we want to have the starting room be in the middle, okay, so the player has all these different options to go to. Now, the process is going to be done in 3 steps. First of all, we are going to block out where our rooms will be. So basically, is there going to be a room here, 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 yes or no? Then we are going to instantiate the room scene. So we're then going to look at the little block out we've done and go, okay, let's spawn a room here, spawn a room here, and then we're going to initialize the rooms. And this essentially means telling a room, hey, you have a neighbor to the north and to the south, so add a door to the north, add a door to the south, and to the east and west, just have a barrier. So how are we going to block out our rooms? This is going to be done using what's known as a 2D array. Now, you're probably already familiar with arrays. Essentially, an array is a piece of data which contain multiple different values, and you access those different values or elements by an index number, okay? 0 for the first element, 1 for the second, etc. Well, a 2D array you can think of as a piece of data that can hold multiple values, but each element of that array is associated with a index number and another index number, okay, like an X and a Y. You can think of it like a 2D grid. We give an X, we give a Y, we get a specific element on that grid, and we can have our array act that way. Now, in Godot, we don't really have built-in 2D arrays, so we'll have to go and create our own custom version of that, which isn't too much of a hassle. It's only a couple more lines of code, but that is going to allow us to then block out our levels. And we are going to do that by essentially having a 2D array with true or false values. False for if there is no room there, and true for if there is a room there. So we're going to start by essentially making the center room where the player spawns, so that is going to be true. Then from there, we are essentially going to look at all 4 directions, and there is going to be a random chance that one of these directions is going to spawn a room. So for example, let's just say north, east, and south has a room spawned, so we'll then basically have I'll set that specific element to true, and then we'll keep on going for each of those rooms until we have reached a certain threshold, such as 10 or 12 rooms, okay? And by the end of that, we should have a clump of blocks in our 2D array that are all true and all connected to one another. Then from here, we can get that 2D map and basically go, okay, we have a room here, 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 and here. Let's spawn in our room scene appropriately based on that map, and then go ahead and connect them all together with their doors. So the final image should look something like the image on the right. So let's hop over into Godot and begin setting this up. So the first step is going to be creating a brand new node. Now I'm just going to create a normal node, it doesn't have to be node 2D, and I'm going to call this one room generation. Let's move it to the top here, and we then want to attach a script. This script is going to be called room generation, and we'll store that inside of our scripts folder. Now inside this script, I am going to start by giving it a class name of room generation, and then we can begin with our variables. Now, for our variables, we want to define a number of things, such as the map size. So I'm going to create an export variable here called map size of type int, and this will be equal to 7. Now, the map size is going to define the width and height of our 2D map. Okay, so how many rooms max can we possibly have in our width and height? So 7 will basically give us a 7 by 7 grid that we can populate. We then want another variable. This is going to be our rooms to generate. This is going to essentially be how many rooms we want to generate. Now, it's not guaranteed that we will get generate this many, but this is going to be the amount we're aiming for and the maximum amount we can possibly generate. The reason why it's not guaranteed to generate 12 rooms, for example, is because with that random chance, there is the chance that, for example, one room, when it is deciding if it should create another, says no for all the possible different doors, and it stops there. Okay, but that is a fairly low chance. We then want a variable for the room count of type int, and this is just going to be how many current rooms we have set up already, so we can keep track of that. We then want a variable for our map. This is going to be of type array bool. Now this is going to be that 2D array I was talking about, okay? But you might be thinking, hey, this is just a normal array. Well, it is a normal array and it is going to store things normally, but the way we access specific elements will be done a bit differently, okay? And this is going to basically define true or false for whether or not a room is going to exist or not. Then we need to keep track of all of the rooms we have instantiated once we have finished generating. So this is going to be an array of rooms like so. And then we need a room position offset, okay? Because when we are spawning in our rooms, we want to know how much of a gap we need between them. Now, I've already done the calculation, and that is about 160 pixels. So basically, the half width of our room is about 70, for example, or 80 pixels. So that is the gap we're going to have between each room scene. We then want to have a variable for our first room x, int equals 3. So essentially this is going to be the index for the x and y for where we want our first room or our starting room to be on the map. So if we have a grid of 7 by 7, then 3 and 3 along the x and y is going to be the center block in the grid, okay? And then we also want to keep track of our first room once we have instantiated it, like so. Okay. And then finally, we also want to have an export variable for our player, and they'll be of type character body 2D. Okay, so those are the variables we have right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and create some of the functions we'll be using. So, of course, we're going to be using the ready function. Now, I'm not going to fill them in just yet. I'm just going to fill them out. We're then going to have another function called generate. And then we're going to have another function called check room. So, check room. This is going to have an x of type int and a y of type int, as well as a desired direction of type vector2, and it's also going to have a boolean is first room of type bool, and we'll give it a default value of false. Now, this is a pretty big function, a lot of parameters. We'll get into exactly what this is and how it works very shortly. The next function we're going to create is going to be instantiate rooms, and this is going to be called after we have generated our 2D array map and where we want to then begin spawning in our rooms. Now, for our room, let's actually go ahead and get a room scene. So here I'm going to create another variable called room scene of type packed scene equals preload. And we essentially just want to find our room template. Now, later on, we are going to be having an array which is randomly going to pick room types, but for now, we only have one room just to get it working, so we'll have room scene here. Now, we have those functions. There are also a couple more that we're going to create, but we'll get around to these once we actually need to utilize them, okay? So, what we're going to do now is up here inside of ready, we first of all want to define our array size. Okay, now our array for the map is essentially going to be 7 by 7, so we want to make it 7 times 7. So here in the ready function, we'll go map.resize, and here it's just going to be map size times map size, okay? Then we want to generate, so we'll call the generate function here. Inside the generate function, we are going to set our room count to be equal to 0. Actually, we're going to do the map resizing down here in the generate function, so we'll paste that there instead, actually. And then what we're going to do is we are going to call the check room function, so check room, sending over our first room x and our first room y. The desired direction is going to be no particular direction, so there'll be vector2.0, and then for isFirstRoom is going to be true. And then after we do that, we are going to instantiate the rooms. Now again, probably don't really know what we're doing here, but I'm just filling in some of the boilerplate stuff that we need for actually generating our rooms down here. But we'll go over exactly what we're doing here in the next lesson. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Welcome back, everyone. So let's have a look at what we've done so far. So here inside the ready function, we are calling generate. Now generate, we are basically setting our room count to 0 and setting our map size to essentially be, or the map array to be the size of our 7 by 7 map grid. Then we are calling the checkroom function. Now, what does checkroom do? Well, essentially, checkroom, we give it a coordinate, an x and a y, relative to the map2D array for a specific room. Now, our first call here, we are giving it our first room x and first room y, which is in the middle of the grid. We are then giving it a desired direction, which is generally the direction we want this room to go. So for example, if this room is one that has been placed after one that was going south, we probably still want to keep going north. So generally we're trying to expand outwards as far as we can get from the center. And then we have a boolean for is first room, and that is because we are going to do a few things differently if this is our first room, and we are setting that to false by default, but up here we are sending that as true. So inside a check room, what are we going to do? Well, here is where we first of all set this x and y value to be an actual room, and then what we do is we check to see if we can expand north, south, east, and west. So the first thing we need to do inside of this function, I'm just going to give myself a bit more room, is return under a number of different conditions, okay? So for example, we don't want to create this room if the room count is greater than or equals to the maximum number of rooms we can generate, okay? So if room count is greater than or equals to rooms to generate, then return, because we don't want to generate more than, for example, 12 rooms. So that's one condition. Now, another reason why we might not create a room here is if it is outside of the map bounds, okay? Because remember, this function is going to then try and expand from this room. So what happens if there is a room on the left-hand side of the map and it wants to create another one west? Well, that is going to basically put it outside of our bounds, and we don't want to create a room there because that's going to result in errors. So here we can go if x is less than 0, or x is greater than the map size minus 1, or if y is less than 0, or if y is greater than the map size minus 1. Then what we're going to do is return, okay? So if we are outside the bounds of our predefined map, then we don't want to create a room. And then finally, if this room already exists, then we want to return as well, because we don't want to overlap rooms. So how are we going to check that? Well, we are storing whether or not we have a room at a specific position here inside of the map array. And we have a room defined by an x and a y coordinate. But if you know arrays, then you can only access the elements in this array with a single index number. Now I'm going to show you how we can actually convert this into a 2D array, or a sort of faux 2D array. Down here, I'm going to create a function, and this is going to be called getMap. So here we'll go func getMap. We're going to send over an x of type int and a y of type int. And this is going to return a boolean value, okay, true or false. So essentially what we're doing here is we have our 1D array that we want to convert into a 2D array. So the way of doing this is simply by going return map x plus y multiplied by map size. Now we can use these 2D coordinates in order to access an element along this 1D array. Now likewise with getMap, we also want to use setMap in order to set a value in our 2D array, setMap, and we are going to give an x and a y, and we also then want a value property or parameter as well, okay? And in here, we're simply going to do the exact opposite. We're going to go map x plus y multiplied by map size equals value, okay? So this is how we are going to get values from our 2D array and set values to our 2D array while still using a typical array with one index number. Okay, so now back up inside of our check room function, we can then check to see if this room already exists. So here we'll go if get map for the x and for the y. If that equals true, then we are going to return, because again, we don't want to put a room on top of another room. Okay, so we have those condition checks there. Now, if all of those have been passed and we are still going on with the function, then we are going to increase our room count by 1. We are then going to set the x and y position to be true in the map, so set map x, y to be true. And then what we need to do is decide, are we going to go north, south, east, and west, okay? We can do multiple of those at the same time. It's not one or the other. So here I'm going to create a variable called go north, okay, go north, and this is going to be equal to randf. Now randf is going to return us a number between 0 and 1. We're going to check to see if this is greater than, and what I'm doing here is known as a ternary operator. Essentially, we have a condition, and if that condition is true, we are going to basically have a value, or if it's false, we're going to have another value. So here we're going to go 0.2 if the desired direction equals vector2 dot up, else 0.8. So what am I doing here? Well, every time that we want to check a room, we are sending over the desired direction. This is the direction that we want this room to go, okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm essentially having a Boolean variable, let's define this as a bool, for go north. So this is true or false if we want to create another room to the north of this one. Now we are deciding if that is true or false based on this condition here, okay? So we are generating a random number between 0 and 1, and then we are checking to see if that number is greater than one of two values. 0.2 if our desired direction is up, so basically there is an 80% chance of this being true if we are trying to go up or go north, or a 20% chance otherwise. So essentially what we're doing here is if our desired direction is north, then we have an 80% chance of go north to be true. Otherwise, if our desired direction was south, for example, then go north would have only a 20% chance of being true. So you can see, we are trying to go along our desired direction, but we don't want to only go there. Otherwise, our map would just be a plus with the player spawning in the middle of it, okay? So that is why we have this layout right here. Now, what we're then going to do is we're going to create an if statement. Now, I'm not going to do go south, go east, go west just yet, as I want you to do that as a bit of a challenge. But here what I'm going to do is simply go if go north or is first room, okay? Because if this is the first room, then we 100% want to create one above. Otherwise, if it's not the first room, then we'll base it on whether or not go north was true or false. So if we are going north, then we are going to call the check room function again. And inside of here, we are essentially going to give it our x, our y -1, okay? Because remember, if we want to go up on our 2D array, that means we want to lower the y index, because remember, 0, 0 is at the top left corner. So to go up, we have to minus the y by 1. So this is going to essentially check to see if we can create a room directly above ours. The desired direction is going to be vector2 dot up if this is the first room. Otherwise, we're just going to send over the desired direction, okay? Because if this is the first room, then we want to keep trying to go up. Otherwise, we'll go whatever it is, okay? So that's all set up right there. And that is then going to call the function again. So you can imagine it's going to call check room again. Now remember, is first room will be equal to false. So it's going to go through all of this. It's then going to check to see if we can go north again, so on and so forth. Now, as a bit of a challenge, I want you to go ahead and set up a variable for go south, go east, go west, filling it in as well, and then a condition check for, again, south, east, and west. So if I got that, I'll see how you're done in the next lesson. Okay, so I hope you had a go at that challenge. Pretty much what we want to do is add in a go south, east, and west here. So I'm going to do south right now. So we'll go var go south of type bool equals randf, which again returns a random number between 0 and 1. And we're checking to see if this is greater than one of two values. We're checking to see if it is greater than 0.2 if our current desired direction is going down. So vector2 dot down. Otherwise, it will be checked if it's above 0.8. So again, if we are already going south, it has an 80% chance of go south to be true, okay? Then what we're going to do is do the exact same thing for east and west. So I'm just going to copy and paste this twice more here. So for go east and go west. So for east, we of course want to replace down with right and west with left. Okay, so now we have four values. It'll be true or false if we want to go along those directions. Then down here, for where we want to continue the chain in those directions, I'm just going to copy and paste this if statement here and paste it 3 more times. So here for go south, we'll go if go south, or if this is the first room, because we always want to expand upon the first room in all directions, we're going to go y plus 1, which is going to be the room directly below us. The direction is going to be vector2 dot down. If is first room, else desired direction. Then for the other ones, we'll have go east. This is going to be x plus 1. Okay, for east, vector2 dot right. And then finally, go west is going to be x minus 1 and vector2 dot left. So there we go. We now have that all set up and ready to go. But how do we actually see our map before we begin instantiating our rooms? Well, one way we could do it is to basically print off line by line our room map, so we can kind of then see in the output here what it will look like. So up here inside of ready, after we generate, what I'm going to do is go 4x in length or in range of map size, and then we'll create another for loop inside y in range of map size. Now this is only going to be temporary, but what we're going to do here is we are going for the 4x here, we're going to create a variable. I'm just going to call this one line, and this is going to be of type string. Then inside of 4y, we're simply going to go line plus equals, and here we'll just go a hashtag symbol if get map x, y. So if get map is true for this specific room, meaning if there is a room, then this line will have a hashtag symbol. Otherwise, we'll simply have a, let's just say, we'll have a 0. Okay, we'll have an O. Then what we're going to do is at the end here, we are simply just going to then print out the line. Now, if I go ahead and run this, if we go to our output, you can see here our basic little room layout. In fact, to make it look a bit nicer, let's add a space after every one of these. Run that again. And there we go. Now, it's a bit hard to see, but you can imagine here in the center, where we are our starting room, we have all of these hashtags as our room. And in fact, I might make this a bit easier by, instead of just having that, we'll just have a bunch of spaces. And there we go. So you can see now our random room layouts that we are having here. If I keep rerunning the game, you can see each time I run it, we are getting a different room layout. This one was pretty lucky. There was absolutely 0 deviation from there. If I do it again, you can see, again, we'll have a different room layout each and every time we run this, okay? So now what we need to do is basically make it so that our room scenes are going to be spawned in so we can actually see them in-game, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and select all of this and just toggle comment, and I'm just going to say this is just going to be a room layout preview, okay? Just in case you want to see it again this way. Okay. So now what we need to do is go down to where we have the instantiate rooms function, and here is where we're actually going to begin spawning in our rooms. Now we're going to do this in a very similar manner to how we done it up here in the ready function. We're going to loop through the x and the y. So here what I'm going to do is inside of instantiate rooms, I'm going to go 4x in range of map size, and then for y in range of map size. We then want to go ahead and basically, if this certain position in our map is not a room, then we are going to continue, okay? We're not going to spawn a room here. So if get map x, y equals false, then continue on to the next element in the array. Otherwise, what we're going to do is here we are simply going to go var room of type room equals room scene dot instantiate. Then we need to go ahead and add this as a child for it to exist in the world. So we'll go get tree dot root dot add child room. So we're now adding it to the scene so it can actually be visible and exist. We then want to set the room's position. Now the room's position, if I go ahead into 2D mode here, drag in our room template, and let's say at the position, so again, 3, 3 is where we're going to have a room. Now if I duplicate that, let's say we have a room directly south of that. So the y then is going to be +1 on the y, And as you can see, the rooms are basically overlapping because the direct coordinate system is a bit offset, okay? We don't want to do it by one at a time. Instead, we have that, if you remember, in our script. At the top here, we have this room position offset. So if we want to go down one, we aren't just going to subtract it by 1, we're going to subtract it by 160, and the room is going to be directly next to it like so. Okay, that is just how we're going to do it. So let's do that. So down here inside of instantiate rooms, we want to set the room's position. So to do that, we'll go room.global position equals vector2 x, y, multiplied by room position offset. And that should be good. So let's go ahead now. We also need to then go ahead and add this room to the rooms array. So rooms.append room, just so we can keep track of all of them. Save that, press play, but you'll notice that we don't see anything because our rooms are generated over to the bottom left corner. So let's go ahead, select our camera. Let's start by making the camera pretty big, so I'll set the X and Y zoom to be 1, drag the camera down here, press play. Now the reason we don't see anything is because it is resulting in some errors. If we open up the debugger and go down to the bottom past all these tile set errors, which we can fix, you'll see here we have this. Instantiate rooms, parent node is busy setting up children, add child failed, okay? And that is because we are kind of running this code on the same frame that we are essentially loading in our scene. So what we can do is here where we go get tree.root.addChild, we're simply going to go .call deferred. And call deferred basically means it is going to call this function at the end of the frame once everything has already been set up. So now if I go ahead and press play, you can see we have our rooms spawned in here. Let's actually zoom the camera out a bit more. So I'm going to set the camera zoom to be 0.5, just drag it down here. Okay, run that again. And there we go, we have our room layout right here. If I go ahead and run that again, there we go, we have a totally different layout. So you can see each time I do this, our room layouts are going to be very, very unique. And that is the amazing thing, you know, you can keep playing this game over and over, and each time you're going to have a different room layout. Okay, so that right there is our rooms. Now, of course, there's more work to be done. You'll notice if I press play, our rooms, they all have these little sticky outy bits, and that are the doors. We need to make it so that any door that is not connected to another room is going to be removed and replaced with a barrier, okay? We also need to tell each room of their neighbors, because when the player exits a room, we're going to teleport them over into the next one. And they, of course, need to know their neighbors to do that. So that is what we're going to be working on in the next lesson.